You're listening to the #1 podcast for oil and gas professionals. What's up? Michael Fry. I'm here with Dallas Bozeman.
Hey, what's happening?
How you doing, D?
Doing good.
We want to welcome you to another episode of the Deepwater Subsea Podcast. So what do we got today, D?
We're talking about the power of progress.
Gotta love progress.
Yeah. So you just got back from Atlanta. You went, saw Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins.
That's right. It was
Pitbull.
Pitbull was there. Yeah. Armando Perez,
The real name.
the real name. Yeah, very interesting. A lot of people think about Tony Robbins as being this hype person, and it was actually quite the opposite. Very much. You need to constantly be developing yourself and moving forward and finding those triggers that are the stressors in your life, and really, he started right off by saying, "I'm not here to be your guru. I'm not here to motivate you. I'm not here to basically." Rah, get the pom-poms out. It was 4 hours of just really taking a look in the mirror. It was probably the best way I could put it. Gary V, huge fan of Gary V. Gary V, same thing. Like, look, if you want to hustle, if you want to be successful, you got to put in the work. Don't make excuses. Don't bitch and complain. A lot of F-bombs, but, an amazing day for me from a personal development standpoint.
Yeah, that's exactly why you went, right? It's so easy to get wrapped up in the hustle and bustle and the grind that, you pick your head up and 2 years later you go, man, like, what have I done to further myself?
Yeah. And it's true. For me, I went for one reason only, was to go in front of people who have been there and done that. Put myself in, because anybody that knows what Tony Robbins events are like, there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of jumping up and down, a lot of, you got to be out of your comfort zone. And for me, I wanted that, being out of my comfort zone. And for basically 14 hours, I was very uncomfortable. But by the time it was over with, it was like, you know what? I'm still alive. That didn't hurt at all, to be honest with you. Very self-conscious when it comes to the image. What's someone going to say? Like, oh, here's a CEO, he's jumping around, or he's having a beer at a ball game, and I just find myself at times not having quote unquote fun, because I'm too self-conscious about what would somebody say if. And in an event like that, when you're with 4,000 people, you have 4,000 complete strangers who are not worried about being self-conscious. They're worried about, taking that look in the mirror. So it was really beneficial. It was great.
And that was one of the things you kind of took from it too, right? Was the forgetting to celebrate success.
Yeah, I mean, Tony brought it up. He talked about, Robin Williams and Robin's story about how he worked so long and so hard to be successful and to make everyone around him happy, and his comedy and everything he did. And yes, he suffered from depression, but in the end, he never took time to really enjoy the fruits of his labor. And it's something that happens to me as well. We joke about it here is, we have a very special bottle of scotch. It's a 30-year-old scotch. And I say, well, when this moment happens, we'll open it. And then that moment happens. And it's like, well, when this moment happens, we'll open it. And it's funny because it's the reverse of, meeting your goals, because you're saying, okay, I've achieved success, but it's not enough. And if you don't stop at that moment and just kind of go, hey, look, we did something great, you'll never find happiness, because it'll never be enough. And you have to reach out and embrace those little wins you get along the way.
Yeah. So last night, me and Mike were talking. I met with a mutual friend of ours, and he was showing me on a graph, that in any good market, a stock trend should be kind of trending, up and to the right. And you're going to have these little peaks and valleys along the way, and there's going to be fluctuations. But over the period of time, you should see a gradual increase. And the point he made that is, if we narrow that window down to a short time frame, just a small period, we look at it and we compare it to another, and we compare it to another, we see these little snippets of these peaks and valleys. And really they look the same. They don't look any different. But if we don't zoom out and get away from it and see on an altitude level how this thing has trended upwards, everything just kind of looks the same. And I think that's exactly what happens in our lives and in our business world is if we forget to set those benchmark moments where we go look back and we say, this is where I was 1 year ago. This is where I was 5 years ago. This is where I was 10 years ago. If we don't ever look back to see where we came from to where we are today, then everything just kind of looks the same and we start feeling depressed. We feel stagnant. We don't feel like growth has ever happened because all we see is these same peaks and valleys occurring.
No, I agree. And I think it's, being a jock, I think a great analogy and being an athlete and CrossFitter like yourself. Oh, I'm definitely not a CrossFitter, but you being a CrossFitter, I think it's just like working out. I mean, if you're constantly pushing yourself and trying to better yourself, I mean, you might be able to go today and run 5 miles. You might be able to run 10 miles. Hell, you and Gary walked, 150 miles. You don't just go out and walk or run a marathon. You have to build up to it. And if it's very easy to go, here's where I'm at today, but where was I at a year ago? Where was I at 2 years ago? Where was I at 5 years ago? And and you're right. I mean, if you don't take the time to look back and reflect on your growth and your development, we were talking about before we came on the air about, I have people who I worked with 5 years ago who still think I'm the guy that I was 5 years ago. I mean, that's 5 years. I mean, let's think about that. That's over 1,500 days, probably 1,600 if you really want to do the math.
Hmm.
That's a long ass time ago. But if you're constantly trying to develop yourself each and every day and continually to mold yourself and develop yourself and improve on your weaknesses, it could be 12 months and you're not the same person. It could be 12 days and you're continuing to develop yourself. And I think that gets missed a lot in today's world and just with the speed of life in general.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I look back, if I look back and say, okay, who was I 3 years ago? Who was I 4 years ago? Something like that. I look at where I am today and like personally, professionally, mentally, spiritually, everything completely different person. Like nothing looks the same as it did 4 years ago. But if I don't look back at that, if I don't go back that far and say what progression have I made, then it just kind of looks like this constant struggle where I'm always fighting uphill and it doesn't seem like I'm really getting anywhere. Like I'm just spinning my wheels.
I mean, hell, look at 14 months ago,
Yeah.
15 months ago. I
Yeah.
mean, we joke about it here, Dallas and myself do about the first time Dallas was on camera and the first time Dallas was on the podcast. And it's the same thing for anybody. I mean, the first time you do something for the first time, you're nervous. Now it's like, hook it up, let's go. It's a piece of cake. So yeah, you have to be able to, enjoying the moment's always tough for me because is that moment really the moment? I mean, I was at a company to where if somebody answered your email, people were popping open beers and it's like, all right, yeah, it's because everything was just a big party to them. That might be part of my problem is it's like, look, we're gonna work hard and develop and grow the business. And when you've been at a place or you've been around people, supervisors, maybe even, siblings who don't look at the bigger picture, I think it kind of warps our way of looking at ourselves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think too, we've kind of both come from a culture where it's been ingrained that if you celebrate success, then you're opening yourself up to complacency. If you start celebrating, then you're missing something. You've never really reached it. You've never really attained anything great. There's always something bigger. There's always that pressure to perform. And man, you just get caught up in the grind where yeah, that was good. Let's focus on that for 24 hours. And then 24 hours later, that's gone. What's the next win?
Yeah, I mean, being a wrestler, I mean, I think it was bad for me too because I grew up in the age where Dan Gable was still a huge influence, and he still is a huge influence today. But if you were a wrestler, Dan Gable was it, right? So he lost his last match his senior year. The very next, I believe the story goes, the very next day he started training for the Olympics. It was like your career has been amazing, but he was like, I lost. Now I have a new goal, which is the Olympics, and he's not going to stop until he basically goes out and destroys everybody during the Olympics. But we were always taught that there's always someone out there working harder. There's always somebody better. You have to push yourself each and every day. Now, football's different. Basketball's different. Other sports are different. With wrestling, it's mano a mano. It's like you step on the mat, it's me versus you. It's like MMA, it's like anything else. the thing that's interesting about CrossFit is it's still basically it's you against the board, right? I mean, how
Hmm.
hard are you willing to push yourself? But I think it's just that. I mean, if you're not willing to step back and enjoy the moment, the military was the same way. You know, I've once I found out that the harder I worked and the better I did at my tests, the faster I got paid. Then it turned into a competition. And there was no stopping until basically until my career was over. You were always trying to be smarter and be better than the next guy.
Hmm. That's it. So kind of what we're talking about here is that the power isn't in the goal itself. The power is in the progress.
That's right.
It's that trending, that constantly achieving better, pursuing better, wanting better for yourself, and pursuing goals that push you outside of your comfort zone, not just things that you're good at and you're going to succeed at. You have to get outside of that, become uncomfortable, and push limits if you're going to see actual growth.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that happened at the event was um, Tony did this in a couple different phases. It was like go around and introduce yourself to three people in a way like you don't want to even meet them. And so you had to go find three people and you went and shook their hands. You're kind of like, hey, you're wasting my time. And it kind of made you feel uncomfortable. But his big thing was the physiological side of what was going on. And so you went through that and then you talked about it. And then the next time was go meet somebody like you are afraid to meet somebody. And then you talked about it. And then the third time was, you know, go meet somebody like they're your long lost friend. Like this is the moment you've been waiting for. Well, what's interesting is when he went back in between each session and said, you know, say out loud how you felt and tell me how your heart rate was and tell me how your breathing was and was it deep or shallow and how did you speak? Like I said, there was 5,000 people in the arena and probably 5,000 people were all saying the same thing. And his message was, it's not you. It's the way we as humans are wired. Everybody gets nervous. Everybody has this. Everybody has anxiety. You just have to learn how to overcome it. And the way you overcome it is by getting outside that comfort zone. There was a psychologist that started the conference off. He said, one of the things he works with is people who have, their fears. And he says, if you have a fear of dogs, when you come into my office for your first visit, there's going to be a dog sitting there because I need to figure out why you're afraid of dogs. And then we address that issue. Same thing goes when it's fear of success or fear of rejection or fear of anything else. Like, unless you know what that trigger is, you're never going to be able to develop yourself to get over it. And that's something that hinders a lot of people from becoming successful in business. And as much as this is oil and gas, and a lot of times we talk about subsea, the reality is if you want to take your career to another level, what's really preventing you? Yes, there's opportunities in today's market, but is it internally driven? Is it your fear of rejection? Like, I don't want to apply for jobs because I don't want to be turned down. I've been turned down so many times and I just quit. I don't know. That's something that people need to think about. But if you're not constantly developing yourself, you're gonna lose at the end of the day.
Yeah. What one thing that you said you kind of brought back that I really liked was that Tony Robbins had said that your creator doesn't want you to stay where you are, that you were designed for progress. Like,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, it's if you really think about it, I mean, regardless of religion or anything else, that's the one thing that, when Tony was saying, hey, it's your creator, it wasn't about, God or Buddha or, Muhammad. It didn't matter. He just said the creator. And if the creator, if you have no religious beliefs, it's just the universe. And so, okay, we'll go with that. Just think of evolution. Like, where were we way back when to where are we today? Technology evolves, people evolve. We're getting, even though we grow older every day, we're getting younger. Our great, great, great grandparents were dying in their 40s. Now we're living to 70s and 80s. But you have to keep evolving each and every day. And that's something that I think is important is the world that we live in is giving us the opportunity to continually develop ourselves. The internet, technology, travel, whatever it is you want it to be. If you're not going to take advantage of it, you're just going to be stagnant and sooner or later opportunities in the world will just pass you by.
yeah, and I think it's a really good point. Like if you look at regardless of religious views, monotheism, polytheism, whatever, all all these beliefs have one thing in common, that you're in a certain place now and you're progressing towards something bigger than yourself. So regardless, there's something in our DNA, in our human nature, that we were designed to progress, to move forward. And it makes perfect sense because, as we interact in our world, like we're constantly cultivating, right? We're farming, we're making things better, we're progressing, new technology, new this. Like we were designed to manipulate this world and to make it our own. So as a human race, it's absolutely right. Like you were created for something more than this. You should constantly be progressing. You need to be investing in yourself. And more importantly, you need to be investing in other people.
No, that's what I think it's for this podcast, especially because it's different from what we normally talk about, right? Um, you really have to, Tony said something that Tony, like I know him, like, hey, like, I got my picture taken with him and now we're good friends, right? But no, I mean, Mr. Robbins, Tony had said something that I thought was really important was you need to love your customers more than you love your own products and your services. If you want to be
Yeah, that's good.
successful, you need to love your customers. And that's one of the reasons why I always talk about customer first, customer satisfaction over profits. But if you're not also focused on continuing to develop those products and services, it's no different than yourself. I mean, if you come to the market and say, this is what I have, this is what it is, it might be great today. It might have been great 5 years from now. It might not be great tomorrow. Look at the Sears and Kmart's and Radio Shacks. And I mean, these guys were all the big box stores years ago. Now they're disappearing. The reason they disappear is because they didn't evolve with technology, and the Amazons and all these different companies have taken them over and passed them by.
That's it. So that's that's the wrap up, right? For today. That's what we're talking about. The power is in progress. You were designed for something bigger than this. You are so much more capable than you realize.
And if you just break it down, not to really dwell on it, it's just think of it like working out. You did a push up today, do two tomorrow, do three. Your body will develop, the strength to continue moving forward. The mind works the same way. You just have to keep pushing yourselves, keep challenging yourself. And the only way it's going to work is like with working out. You have to put the stressors against it, and sooner or later you'll find that what you used to be afraid of or what you used to have reservations in doing are no longer there.
That's it.
So cool. Well, as always, we appreciate your guys' support. Again, for me and Dallas, it's always about, paying it forward, giving you guys something to think about. And really, if it wasn't for you on the other end of this, I guess the other end of the headphones, the other end of this mic, we would just be talking to ourselves. So we're always grateful. Be safe. Stay committed, keep moving forward, and we'll talk to you really soon.